Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents Shadows and Dreams by Alexis Hall, narrated by Gould. Prologue. Lovers and Murders. My name's Kane, Kate Kane. I'm a private investigator, operating out of a dingy office just off Bow Street. 30-something years ago, my deranged fairy queen of a mother left me on my dad's doorstep, wrapped in a wolfskin, in a basket made of briars. 15 years ago, I was deep in the closet, dating a vampire dickhead who hated himself, failing my A-levels, and trying to come to terms with being a fairy princess. A fairy princess with a bunch of scary hunter powers and a mum who keeps trying to take over her body. 10 years ago, I dumped the vampire, moved to London, done a BTEC in private investigation, and got a job with a bloke named Archer. Last year, I split up with my long-term girlfriend, slept with a client, and got my partner killed. Not entirely in that order. 3 months ago, I was hired by Julian St. Germain, one of the foremost powerful vampires in England, to investigate a murder at one of her clubs. I saved her from a crazy fairy sewer lord, but along the way I ended up striking a deal with a giant rat gestalt, swearing fealty to the Witch Queen of London, and playing sex chicken with an alpha werewolf. Also, I might have accidentally killed a 1,000-year-old vampire prince. Oh, and me and Julian are sort of seeing each other. Chapter 1. Brothers and Bureaucrats. Snow was falling through silver mist on the dream of a city. I edged forwards over the icy bridge, my sword raised to strike. The sorceress raised her hand to the pearl-grey sky. The clouds cracked open. I threw myself aside, and a lance of green-tinted lightning struck the place where I'd just been standing. I rolled to my feet and charged. Our blades met in silence. The snow glistened on the edge of my sword and dusted the dark green coils of the sorceress's unbound hair. I wrapped my free hand round her sword arm and pinned it against my body, turning my own blade back to bring the point level with her throat. She smiled. Her eyes gleamed like absinthe behind her ornate mask. She leaned towards me and ran her fingers gently across my cheek. In the half-light, her nails sparkled bright as emeralds. I ran my sword through her throat. She billowed into green smoke and dissipated into the mist. I awoke to the smell of fresh coffee and the taste of wormwood. I'd been having these dreams since I'd sworn fealty to Nimue. Sometimes it was a lady in green, sometimes it was a giant pig, sometimes it was shadowy armies, and once it had been this weird monster with a snake's head, a lion's body, and rabbit's feet that I'd chased in circles and then lost somewhere in Seven Dials. To be honest, I wasn't exactly thrilled with my new nighttime adventures, and I missed the days when the dreams I remembered involved 3 nuns and a set of handcuffs. But Nim had given me her help when I'd asked for it, and it could have been a lot worse. There was a knock on the door. "It is 8 o'clock, Miss Kane." Speaking of deals with supernatural beings, Elise had been foisted on me by a crazy rat god as the price for some annoyingly vague information. She turned out to be an animated statue, but she doesn't take up much space. She brews a mean cup of coffee, and she fixed my washing machine, so it was working out pretty well. I pulled on my fluffy dressing gown and went through to the living room. There was a mug of coffee and a banana waiting for me on the dining table. Elise was a big believer in the practical value of the humble banana. I do not like bananas. "Did you sleep well?" asked Elise. She still looked like a supermodel, but since she'd started buying her own clothes, she'd taken to dressing like a librarian. She was currently wearing a long tweed skirt and a silk blouse, with a grey woolen cardigan over the top. She told me once that she chose her clothes partly for their texture. I unloaded her laundry a couple of weeks ago, and she's got some of the nicest underwear I've ever seen, and I like to think I'm an expert. Same old, same old. I slumped down at the table. Misty London, scary chicken green, faint sexual undertone. "I am concerned, Miss Kane. Restful sleep is a necessary biological function. I do not believe this can be good for you. Elise, I drink, I smoke, I'm dating a vampire. I picked up the banana and waved it under her nose. Apart from these, I don't think I do anything that's good for me. That is poor reasoning. The fact that you undertake many activities that are harmful to you should lead you to minimize risks in other areas of your life, but I am pleased you are still eating your bananas. I diligently ate my banana, finished my coffee, and got dressed. By the time I got down to the car, Elise was settled in the driver's seat and was programming the sat-nav. Since Elise doesn't eat and only pays me a nominal rent, she spends most of her salary on gadgets. My flat is piling up with coffee makers, sandwich toasters, automatic coin sorters, and hardcore power tools. She also has this remote-control helicopter, but after the incident with my drinks cabinet, she's no longer allowed to use it in the flat. I got in and buckled up. I never used to be comfortable in the passenger seat. It was kind of a control thing, but driving makes Elise so damn happy that I feel like a dick saying she can't. And I've come to appreciate the headspace, or the extra 20 minutes sleep. A lilting Welshwoman instructed us to turn left out of the driveway. I gestured at the dashboard. "You've been driving us to work for 3 months now. Why do you need a sat-nav?" I thought it would be useful to have a second opinion. "And I don't count, do I?" "Your voice is not so pleasant, Miss Kane." "What's wrong with my voice?" "I do apologize. I was merely teasing. I assure you, your voice is sweet and melodious." "Damn straight." Some time later, the Welshwoman helpfully informed us that we had arrived at our destination, and we went up to the office. Archer's name was still on the door, but Elise had taken his desk. She'd made a few other changes too, like getting the paperwork off the floor and into the filing cabinet, and I had about half as many unprocessed invoices and unpaid bills as I'd had 3 months ago. We were just wrapping up the Fletcher case. Mrs. Fletcher had hired us to find out if her husband was cheating on her. That sort of job is the bread and butter of the detective business, but it's fucking depressing because, basically, everybody loses. Either they are cheating, and so your marriage is ruined, or they're not, in which case you've wasted a ton of money and destroyed the trust in your relationship. Mr. Fletcher had been cheating, but it had been tough to get evidence because his mistress was a ghost, so she hadn't actually shown up on film, which meant we'd had to shell out for some good old-fashioned spirit photography. Wrapping up the job left me officially between cases, and frankly, there wasn't much chance of anything major coming up until after Christmas. Elise would probably want to use the time productively to get on top of the bookkeeping, but I was looking forward to taking a break, spending some quality time with my vampire girlfriend, and heading back up north to visit the folks. I hadn't seen much of Julian since I'd rescued her from the King of the Court of Love, because there'd been some major political fallout since I'd taken the Prince of Swords down a sewer, and he hadn't come out again. The advantage of not seeing someone as much as you'd like is that, when you do, the sex is fucking amazing. On the other hand, since Julian is the vampire prince of pleasure, that kind of comes as standard. So you're mostly left with the disadvantage, which is, well, that you don't see them as much as you'd like. I'd known what I was getting into from pretty much the moment I walked into her office, and I'm well past my spend every moment together I am nothing without you phase, but I don't like keeping to someone else's schedule. Maybe I'm messed up, but missing her makes me feel needy, and that makes me feel annoyed, and that makes me drink too much, and that makes Elise sad, and that makes me feel guilty, and that makes me more annoyed. And then I see Julian, and it's all wonderful. I stared moodily out of the window and thought about going outside for a fag break. Since Elise started working for me, I'm legally obliged to provide a smoke-free environment so I don't give her lung cancer, despite the fact that, as far as I know, she doesn't have lungs. That was when Tash walked into my office. I'd pulled her at the candy bar about 3 months ago, but entirely failed to follow through. She'd given me her number, and I'd given her my card, but I'd never called her and, honestly, never expected to see her again. It was pretty obvious this wasn't a social visit. She still had that quirky pixie look, but it was like someone had stolen all her magic dust. Hi, she said. I know this is weird, but I need your help. Truth be told, it was a little bit awkward, but my social weirdness threshold has gone way up since my girlfriend tried to murder my ex-girlfriend because her ex-girlfriend tried to murder her. Take a seat. I waved across my desk. Can I get you anything? Perhaps a cup of tea would be appropriate, offered Elise. Tash huddled into a chair. Yes, thank you. She had surprisingly good manners for a girl who'd been up for shagging in the doorway of Pizza Express. Elise disappeared into our tiny kitchenette, and Tash seemed to relax a bit. I shunted my mid-morning whiskey behind a stack of old case notes and tried to look professional. What's the problem? It's Hugh. The words came out in a rush. My brother, Hugh, he's disappeared, but he broke his leg. We called the police, and it's been more than 2 days, and I'm worried. He isn't answering his phone, and nobody's seen him. There's this leaflet, and it says 99% of people come back within 48 hours, but it's been 48 hours and he hasn't come back, and I don't know what to do. I should probably have said something comforting, but I couldn't think of anything. Who saw him last? I don't know. She picked up one of the Cane and Archer pens Elise had recently ordered for publicity, which were now scattered all over the office. Probably somebody at the hospital. Which one? The Whittington. He broke his leg changing a light bulb. Because he was standing on a swivel chair. Because he's an idiot. Any history of depression? She shook her head. Any personal problems? No. He was doing really well. He was doing this MA at Brunel, and he just got this major internship or something. If he was at Brunel, I asked, why did they take him to the Whittington? He did it at his girlfriend's house in Highgate. He was only supposed to be in overnight, but there were complications. And he had no enemies or anything like that? What? Hugh? You'd be surprised. I shrugged. I know he's your brother, but it would be really helpful if you could find out if he gambled, drank, or took drugs, or if he had any debts or dangerous friends. She thought about it for a moment. He played D&D? Eve had tried to get me into that. I played a gnome paladin and got killed by a big cube of jelly when I was level 3. After that, I just hung out on the edges of the group and stole their pizza. At that moment, Elise came in with tea for Tash and a coffee for me. Would you like me to take notes, Miss Kane? Any objections? Tash shook her head. OK, Miss... I suddenly remembered that Tash's surname was not the teetotal lesbian. Shawcross. OK. Miss Shawcross is looking for her brother, Hugh, who disappeared from the Whittington Hospital in Highgate between 2 and 3 days ago. He was being treated for a broken leg. The police are looking into it, but the family hasn't heard anything yet. The police will probably see him as low risk, given his age and circumstances. He was studying for his master's at Brunel, and he'd recently started an internship. The accident happened at his girlfriend's house, which is in Highgate. As far as Miss Shawcross knows, he had no enemies, no mental health issues, and no personal problems. Just the broken leg, added Tash. That's strange, isn't it? Disappearing when you can't walk? It could have meant he'd been abducted, but the police take things like that very seriously. Since he was still floating around the MPB and hadn't been kicked up to serious crimes, it meant it probably wasn't a kidnapping, or at least didn't look like one to the police. So that left either the plot of an episode of Miss Marple, in which a man with a broken leg discharged himself from hospital for no clear reason, or there was something supernatural going on. Right now, the supernatural explanation looked more likely, but then again, when all you've got is an enchanted hammer, every problem starts to look like a possessed nail. It's a little unusual, I said, impressed with my own tact. I'll need his contact information, current address, a photograph, as recent as you can get. Digital is fine. I'll also need details of the internship, his friends, and the name and address of his girlfriend. Tash pulled out her phone. I'll email you some photos. It's kane@kaneandarcher.com, right? I nodded. I remember when you had to wander around with a single copy of a crappy Polaroid. It's way easier now. Everybody puts a ton of shit online. But you still have to remember that whatever people say about our media-obsessed age, people don't put their whole lives on Facebook, just the bits of their lives they want their friends to know about. It's not like you ever see, so-and-so has updated their status, borrowed 20 grand from Jimmy Machete Carter to fund my secret crack habit. Tash glanced up again. Done. I've also sent you all his contact details and his girlfriend's address. Her name's Sarah. They met at York when he was in his first year. They've been going out forever, like 3 years or something. And the internship. It was with Locke Enterprises. Hugh wouldn't stop talking about it. Well, fuck. I was about to be hired by a woman I'd very nearly slept with to find her missing brother, who was working for the woman who'd left me for a tech startup at the tech startup she left me for. Not that it's a startup anymore. I've never quite understood what Eve does, but whatever it is, it's massive. She's the only person I've ever heard of who's been on the front cover of Time, Wired, and Diva in the same month. There was a slightly uncomfortable silence. How much is... began Tash. I mean, how much do you... Well, it depends on how much work I end up having to do, but it'll probably work out at about 300 a day. Tash turned a sort of grey colour. Do you think you can find him? I can't make any promises. I'll get the money. I've got some savings, and I can ask my parents if I have to. I nodded. Have you still got the same number? Yeah. I'll contact you if I need more information, and if you think of something or hear anything, let me know immediately. So, what, do I just wait around? Pretty much, but I'll keep you up to date. Tash nodded, put down her almost untouched tea, and made her way to the door. She turned. Thanks, Kate. It's okay. It's my job. I'll do what I can. All right. She left. Well, it looks like those accounts are going to have to wait. I tried not to sound inappropriately happy that some guy had gone missing. You seem devastated, Miss Kane. We'll need background checks on Shawcross, Tash, the girlfriend, and the family as well. There probably won't be anything, but you never know when someone is going to turn out to be a secret member of the Royal Society for the Promotion of Human Sacrifice. I will take care of it. Thanks. And try to find out a bit more about this internship, what it involved, who else went for it, that kind of thing. Of course, Miss Kane. I could really get used to having Elise around. She dealt with all the things I didn't want to deal with, like paperwork and my ex-girlfriends. I pushed back my chair and stood up. I'm going to head off to the hospital, see if I can find out why the police don't think this is shady as all hell. I will forward any relevant information to you. I nodded, grabbed my hat and my coat, and jumped on the tube to Archway. It was a short walk up Highgate Hill to the Whittington, which was one of those shiny hospitals, all yellow brick, revolving doors and gleaming glass. The reception area looked like something out of a hotel, or maybe a spaceship. White floor, white tiles, and a circular pine effect desk. I took the direct approach, by which I mean I lied. I'm here to visit Hugh Shawcross. He's in with a broken leg? The receptionist tapped apathetically at his keyboard. He was moved to Nightingale Ward the morning after he was admitted, but... More tapping. It looks like he's no longer a patient here. You mean you sent him home? Tap, tap, tap. Mr. Shawcross appears to have informally discharged himself. I guess that was hospital speak for just walked out. Thanks anyway. Nobody was paying attention to what I was doing, and the receptionist was already dealing with another inquiry, so I wandered off down a corridor. Hospitals are a funny mix of high and low security. They'll never tell you anything, but because they're technically public buildings, you can bot around them as much as you like, as long as you don't try to walk into intensive care or something. I followed the signs to Nightingale Ward. Once I got away from reception, it was quite busy. There was a lot of running around and people in white coats whispering to each other in the corridors. I got the feeling this was not a happy hospital. Closer to Nightingale, things got even more frenetic, and I arrived just in time to see them rushing a covered body off the ward and into an elevator. I'm not a doctor, but this wasn't looking good. Nightingale turned out to be the respiratory unit. which struck me as a strange place to stick a guy with a broken leg. The whole ward was in lockdown. I went to peer through the glass panels in the doors, but then I got pulled out of the way by a man in blue pyjamas who told me I shouldn't be there. I heard my friend was transferred. The ward is off limits to visitors at the moment. I faked concern, probably not very convincingly. I'm fine with lying, but emotions in general are outside my comfort zone. Oh, no. Why? What's wrong? Will he be okay? The ward's very crowded, but everything's under control. Why don't you try calling the hospital for an update in a day or two? My distraught visitor impression had exhausted my limited acting ability. Okay, I walked off the way I'd come. So, Hugh had been admitted with a broken leg and ended up with some unknown contagious disease. This is exactly why I don't like hospitals. I really hoped this wasn't going to be another zombie plague. There'd been an outbreak when I'd taken Eve up to Lake Windermere for our 3rd anniversary, and we'd spent the whole weekend under siege in the hotel, making Molotovs from the minibar and clubbing reanimated tourists to death with souvenir walking sticks. But still, it sounded like the only thing I was going to pick up hanging around the ward was a horrible illness. It was time for a new approach. I don't know much about hospitals, but I do know if you want information about pretty much anything, you find an administrator. It's easy to be dismissive about pen pushers and bean counters, but there comes a point in your life when you really need to know where your pens are and how many beans you've got. I followed the sign to the admin block and blustered my way into the hospital administrator's office. She was young, hot, sleek, and irate. But then I had just barged in on her unannounced. The plaque on the desk read Rona Conway. "Can I help you?" she asked in a tone that suggested she intended to do nothing of the sort. There were 2 ways to do this. I could be subtle and clever and tease the information out of her with a plausible sequence of well-constructed fictions, or I could not do that. "Name's Kane, Kate Kane. I'm a private investigator. I've been hired by the family of Hugh Shawcross to investigate his disappearance." Rona raised one perfectly shaped brow into a delicate arch. "Thank you, Miss Kane, but I've already told everything I know to the actual police." Ooh, burn. Was it wrong that I kind of wanted to do her right there? Okay, Kate, be professional about this. Also, you have a girlfriend who can juggle cars. "A man is missing, Miss Conway. One of your wards is locked down. Mr. Shawcross was admitted with a broken leg, contracted an unknown respiratory infection, and then simply disappeared. This isn't looking good for you." "I'm under no legal obligation to talk to you. In fact, I'm fully entitled to have you ejected from the building." "Look," I said, "I don't care how you run your hospital. I don't care what's going on in Nightingale Ward. All I want to do is find Mr. Shawcross. I don't want to make your job difficult, but I can." Rona's eyebrow went up again. "Can you?" "Mr. Shawcross's sister is very upset and very photogenic, and the only thing the newspapers love more than a kidnapping is a health scare." "He wasn't kidnapped," she snapped. "You seem pretty certain of that." She sighed. "Fine, you can see the tapes if it'll get you out of my hair. But there's no mystery here. He just got up and walked out. With a broken leg. People leave hospitals with injuries and illnesses all the time. Why was he transferred to Nightingale? That is none of your business. His health will affect his behaviour. Is he dying? Is he delirious? It makes a difference. I absolutely can't discuss a patient's confidential medical records with you." Well, it had been worth a try. "Can you at least tell me who was on duty the night he disappeared?" "Give me a moment." She keyed a few commands into her computer. "All right, it was Tony Sewan. He's on days from Thursday, but if I find you harassing my staff, I won't hesitate to press charges." "Don't worry, I don't harass people, I just annoy them." 10 minutes later I was sitting in a back office going through security footage with a bloke called Reg. This basically came down to watching empty corridors in real time for about 6 hours, and it's not like you could kick back with a beer and a bucket of popcorn. although Reg did have a packet of dry-roasted peanuts which he was happy to share. You can speed the process up very slightly by spinning through the bits where there's blatantly nothing happening, although that can be counterproductive if you're looking for supernatural creatures. Vampires move so quickly they're hard to see even at regular speed, never mind on fast-forward. Sometimes I'd see a flicker and I'd have to go back and watch 10 seconds, frame by frame. By the end, Reg probably thought I was nuts. A little bit after midnight on the 3rd of December, the doors to Nightingale Ward opened, and Hugh Shawcross strolled out. Well, no wonder the police ruled out abduction. He was wearing jeans and a shirt and a knitted tank top, no coat and no cast. For a man with a broken leg and an unknown respiratory ailment, he seemed remarkably healthy. It took a moment to sync up the camera feeds, but I managed to track his progress through the hospital. He didn't do anything out of the ordinary, and nobody stopped him. But why would they? The last shot was him walking across reception before he disappeared into the night. I get quite a few missing persons cases that go this way. I'd been trying not to jump to any conclusions, but from where I was sitting now, it seemed fairly clear-cut. Sudden disappearance, short respiratory illness, immediately healed of minor physical injuries. Sorry, Tash, your brother's a vampire. Chapter 2. Abductions and Arguments. I rang Elise from the front entrance of the hospital. Good evening, Miss Kane. Hugh's a vampire. Are you attempting to convey information, or are you trying to recreate a popular Abbott and Costello routine? What are you talking about? I am sorry. I thought you may have wanted me to reply, I don't know, so that you could respond with, no, I don't know's a werewolf. Elise, you can rest easy in the knowledge that I would never want you to do that. That, Miss Kane, is because you have no soul. I started walking down the hill back towards Archway. OK, let me start again. Elise, Miss Shawcross's brother is a vampire. Does this mean the case is closed? Well, I still haven't found him, but at least now I know what I'm looking for. Do you wish me to continue my current tasks? There's no point shutting anything down at the moment. I don't know why he was turned, or who did it, but it's even more important we find him quickly. He could freak out and nom a bunch of people. I paused. Actually, prioritise finding the girlfriend because she could be in danger. New vampires tend to go back to what they know, and they can have real self-control problems. I arrived at the tube station and started pushing my way through the commuters. I really timed this badly. Very well, Miss Kane, said Elise. Shall I meet you at home, or does this merit an all-nighter? It's okay for you. Some of us actually sleep. But you're right, this is important. I'll come back to the office. Would you like me to compile the takeaway menus? Can we just get pizza this time? I looked up and saw Sir Caradoc, the eldest vampire kid of the last Prince of Swords, coming towards me. People were getting out of his way quickly, which I could understand because he had a kind of Oswald Mosley vibe. I'd only met him once before, and I'd been unfortunately naked at the time. Not the best way to start your relationship with an Aryan poster boy from the actual Crusades. Give me a minute, Elise. I slipped the phone in my pocket, but didn't hang up. You never know when you'll be glad someone was listening. I glanced over my shoulder. There was another vampire behind me, and two more coming in on either side. They wore sharp black suits and crisp white shirts, which made them look like the undead FBI, but for some reason they seemed to have the St. John ambulance cross embroidered in red on their ties. This was clearly not a social visit. And they also probably weren't going to teach me how to put people in the recovery position. Sir Caradoc came steadily through the crowd and got right up in my grill. If we hadn't been in a crowded place, and he hadn't been an 800-year-old vampire who could have ripped my head off without thinking about it, I'd have lamped him one. "Catherine Kane," he actually fucking intoned. "By the authority of the council, I arrest you for the murder of Erglica, thrice-risen Prince of Swords." Well, fuck. I was dead. I didn't even bother to think about running. He'd have caught me before I could turn round, and trying to resist arrest would look really bad. Not that I was expecting a fair trial. People who get taken away by vampires don't come back.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?